Chad Hasty Show, News Talk, 95.1 FM, 790 AM KFYO. Take a look at some statewide news, and joining us right now to talk about that and also national political headlines as well, GOP political strategist Matt Mackowiak. Matt, good morning. How are you?
Hey, Chad. Good morning. I'm doing great. How about you?
Doing well. Appreciate you joining us today. Lost in the news from yesterday. We did have some Texas political news going on this weekend, and one of those dealing with Wendy Davis. The Democrats have not been successful at finding anyone serious to run for governor, and Wendy Davis seems to be a name coming back.
Yeah, she was asked, I guess, over the weekend what the percentage chance was that she could run for governor this time, and she said it was 99% she would not run. And so whoever was asking her that question then followed up and said, well, does that mean that there's a 1% chance you could run for governor? And if so, why? And she said, well, somebody needs to run against Abbott. If no one else will, I will. So, look, I think where the Democrats are right now, and I don't profess to have, lots of inside knowledge, but based on everything I'm picking up, the leading, I think, candidate is going to be, at least right now, Andrew White, the son of the former governor, Mark White. I think he's a Houston-based attorney. I actually don't know that much about him. I know that he was doing some heroic things during the Hurricane Harvey situation. He had a flatbed boat. I think he was helping rescue people, but obviously not very well known, not going to probably be able to raise very much money, although we'll see. And part of how he's positioning himself is that he wants to be a moderate. He wants to be an extreme moderate almost. He says he's not a Democrat, he's not a Republican, he's got views of both parties. And based on what I've seen out there kind of in social media and on the web, core Democrats are not happy that could be their leading candidate for governor, that he's not going to pass sort of their litmus test on some of their issues. So they're a little bit of a mess right now. I mean, the filing period begins here in about a week, and they really don't have even a semi-credible candidate for governor. It's a really quite a stunning thing.
Does anyone buy the I guess I'm a moderate Democrat, I'm the old school moderate Democrat? There's apparently an attorney out here in Lubbock who's thinking about challenging the Texas Attorney General, saying that I'm a old school West Texas Democrat with crossover appeal to Republicans. I honestly don't see that working.
Well, the challenge with that is that it's very hard to raise money in the middle, right? I mean, generally, you're able to raise money if you can create enthusiasm within your own party. And I think as we've seen, certainly in the last 2 years, the Republican Party and the Democratic Party have both the energy is on the edge on both sides. Certainly true on the Democratic Party side. I mean, all the energy right now is on the Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren wing. It's not in the middle. And so now I actually think the next Democratic governor of Texas, whenever that is, 10, 20, 50 years from now, is likely to be a moderate. It's going to have to be someone that can win some Republican votes and win independents and still hold Democrats. But there's always a challenge with that kind of profile of raising money, because you obviously have to get through a Democratic primary. We know that on the Republican side because our primaries have been so competitive and so interesting at different levels of government, in different levels of the ballot over the last 5 or 10 years. But Democrats are going to be learning that, I think, this cycle, in a very major way.
Another name that popped up over the weekend, Texas Democrat Julian Castro, saying that he may run for president. He doesn't want to run for governor, but he may run for president in 2020.
Yeah, I really have to sort of shake my head at that. Only in the sense that I don't see what his case is. The mayorship of San Antonio is extremely weak. You have very little power. It's a city manager system of government. His record in San Antonio was very mixed. He was a fairly anonymous member of the Obama cabinet as HUD secretary. I think if you asked 1,000 people in Texas what's one thing he did as HUD secretary, you probably couldn't get a substantive answer. So the question is, now that he's a former cabinet secretary and a former mayor and has no elected office and no path to an elected office, how does he raise money for president when he's going to be running against sitting United States senators and sitting governors and a couple members of Congress, and they're going to have a huge field? I do understand that a next-generation Latino Democratic candidate could create excitement, and I don't doubt that he has some political skills. This may be more of a bid to be vice president than a bid to be president, but I think the question is going to be how does he find a way to raise any real money to be credible, to even be a second-tier candidate for president next time? I still sort of have some doubt about that, but he has a lot of self-belief, certainly, and I guess there's really no downside to running for president if you're a Democrat next time. There's going to be a very big field. It's going to be very unpredictable. And it might even be good for him in terms of raising his name identification nationally and getting out there.
Taking a look at tax reform, this is something that Republicans have wanted to get done, that the president has wanted to get done.
Yeah.
The tax bill that was released, I know it's already gone through some changes. You already have some pushback obviously on the Democratic side, but also on the Republican side.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem like everybody's happy with what's been released.
Yeah, there's there are always going to be issues, given that they were going to be getting rid of almost all the deductions, because all those deductions have constituencies, and they have companies and industries that benefit, or individuals, groups of individuals that benefit, and there are powerful lobby efforts to try to protect those deductions. So what's interesting here in terms of the timing, Chad, is the House Ways and Means Committee is marking up the bill starting today. They'll be doing it over the next 4 days. It'll be an absolute marathon, run like a sprint. They'll be looking at everything, considering amendments, considering changes. I think one thing you're going to see get a lot of attention is this adoption provision, which I think gave a benefit to those who adopt children. That was removed from the proposed bill. I think that's getting a lot of pushback from social conservatives and from Republicans. Marco Rubio's been one of the leaders of that, a number of others. So I think that may get fixed. There's a couple other sort of business issues. There's a provision related to, I think, companies that do a lot of cross-border commerce. And so, there's, I think, another provision having to do with people that have really rare health problems, really rare diseases. They had some type of deduction that they're no longer getting, so you could see their taxes go up, which I think no one really wants to see that. So they got to work all that out. And the other thing to watch, Chad, is that, if they put some of those in, it's going to cost more money, and they have to stay within the budget framework that they passed last year, which I think is $1.5 trillion over 10 years, I think is the maximum they can add to the deficit. So what does that mean? It means they may need more money. And so the only pay for that hasn't been tapped right now that I'm aware of is to strip the individual mandate from Obamacare. That's one I think Kevin Brady, the Ways and Means Chairman, doesn't want to use, but he knows he can use it if he has to, and I know that they've already asked for a score from Congressional Budget Office. So that is another fight to watch. They may end up stripping the individual mandate out of Obamacare as part of the tax reform package, and that may allow them to do some of these other things that would get them the votes they need. Yeah,
which would be big. How does Senator Rand Paul, for those who don't know, he was assaulted over the weekend, 5 broken ribs or cracked ribs, however they describe it. They said that he could be missing time. That on the Senate side, I mean, again, he could show up, of course, and still vote, but doesn't that kind of put the vote into a little bit more of a dire situation on the Senate side?
It does, and the Senate is not as far along as the House is. The Senate Finance Committee has not released their bill, has not unveiled it. I expect they'll do that in a couple weeks, perhaps. I think they're probably in the final stages of discussing it privately, at least from Chairman Orrin Hatch's perspective. But you're right. Once it gets to the floor of the Senate, that's when they're going to need the votes, because they can only lose 2 Republican votes. They have to have a majority. And, of course, you have not just Rand Paul who's having those concerns. You have John McCain, who's battling very severe brain cancer. But then you also have Thad Cochran of Mississippi, who's had his own very significant health challenges in the last few weeks, including missing some votes and some time in the hospital and some time on bed rest. So yeah, I mean, the margin is already really, really, really tight in the Senate. They're not going to have much margin to lose, a couple members that they normally would have. The Senate is obviously the bigger question mark on tax reform. I think ultimately they will get the votes they need in the House. I think that'll happen before Thanksgiving. The Senate really is the question mark.
Matt, tell folks where they can find your newsletter and then also the latest details on your last podcast.
Yeah, the podcast is called Mac on Politics. We just interviewed Robert Mueller biographer Garrett Graff about Mueller and the Russia inquiry. A lot of insight there. You could find that on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, and on the web at maconpolitics.com. We also send out a morning newsletter about Texas politics and Texas news that you can find at mustreadtexas.com.
All right, Matt, as always, appreciate your time.
Take care.
Have a good one. It's Matt Mackowiak. You can, of course, follow him on Twitter.